You have made an excellent decision to click on this video. This video is one of the most important videos on this channel. Make sure you watch the entire video. This will sound very strange, but the first social media post that famous actor Jamie Foxx made since he became ill, in which he said he had been to hell and back again. This first social media post that Jamie Foxx made on the same day that Elon Musk tweeted that Twitter's name would change to X on July 23rd. And there are two X's in Jamie Foxx's name. And the sudden collapse of LeBron James's son while playing basketball, and Elon Musk's tweet in response to the collapse of LeBron James's son on July 25th. And the collapse of the crane that was lifting 16 tons of concrete in Manhattan near the entrance to the Lincoln Tunnel that is named after the 16th president, and the FOXX that was at the Temple Mount Wall in Jerusalem on the date in the Hebrew calendar that regards the destruction of the temple on the Temple Mount. This FOXX that ties to Jamie Foxx are all prophecies from God that are predicting that President Trump, the 45th president who is from Manhattan, will die from a heart attack on November 7th, 2023, which is why the crane collapsed from 45 stories above the ground and slammed into a tower, as the 45th president is known for his tower. And these are prophecies that are predicting that Israel will nuke and completely destroy Damascus, Syria on September 4th, 2023. And these are prophecies that are predicting that the kickoff event to the worldwide alien deception of demons pretending to be aliens will begin on November 11th, 2023. And these prophecies are predicting that the symbolic beginning of the zombie pandemic and demonic possession of the masses will begin on April 20th, 2024. This video will explain these things and so much more. The date that this video is posted proves that these predictions are being made ahead of time, as do these time-stamped emails and forensic notes PDF documents. If you are skeptical for some reason, please email me and I will forward these to you. All right, this video here is extremely important. You have made an excellent decision to watch this video. Make sure you watch all of this video. It is very important and very interesting. All right, this video here will be a really great example of how God's big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works, in that it incorporates so many different things and ties them together within the same sign, and there's different communication and symbolism contained in that overlaps with each other, that's pointing to different things and regards different things, whether it be coming events or Bible prophecy. But anyway, so this video is going to talk about a lot of things. And to make it relevant and interesting, I'll just jump ahead and say that what I will be talking about will be confirmation for a couple of predictions in the future. And this is what will make what will be said true. And that is the purpose, the reason why God has provided these predictions through these prophetic signs and connections, is to prove the matter. And that's why, for example, 1/3 of the Bible is prophecy. It is for the purpose of God proving that it is the Word of God. This is also why, for example, Jesus said to those that didn't believe him, if you don't believe what I am saying, then believe the works, believe the miracles that I have done. And so that's why one of the last passages in the Bible is Revelation chapter 19, verse 10, the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy. Christianity is a prophetic tradition. And that being said, unfortunately, many Christians do not study prophecy. They don't think about prophecy. They don't think of God's work in terms of signs and patterns. If you were to ask the average Christian if they could name one prophetic sign, they wouldn't even understand the question. And they would miss the most obvious one, which would be the Star of Bethlehem, for example. And this is how, for example, the wise men in the east knew to come to Jerusalem 700 miles away and worship a Jewish king. They were Jews in ancient Babylon that understood the signs that God was giving in the heavens, in the night sky. So anyway, what I'm saying is that this video what I'm about to get to is that these signs will confirm that President Trump, God's trumpet that he has been using to trumpet and highlight his prophetic signs, is predicted to die of a heart attack on November 7th. And also, Israel will nuke and completely destroy Damascus, Syria on September 4th, 2023. And Trump will die on November 7th, 2023. And the prophetic sign that I'm about to get to will confirm that, these two predictions I'm talking about, for example. But also there is a third prediction that stems from the content of this video, which is that on April 20th next year will be some sort of symbolic beginning of the coming zombie pandemic. Okay, that is what God is communicating. I have some ideas as to what that means, and we will likely get to some of that in this video. And if not completely tell that story, there will be many other videos that will be talking about it. Okay, so to go through this, I'm simply going to read emails that I wrote to friends as the signs were being discovered and learned. This is the quickest way for me to go through this, for one thing, and it's already been explained adequately, and so there's no point in me trying to devise some other script for this video. And we're running out of time, and there's so much information to get to anyway. So let's begin with the sign number 1 that began this thread, which was the son of basketball player LeBron James, Bronny James, and his cardiac arrest. And this sentence here comes from this article from the dailymail.co. This isn't my sentence. This is the headline of the article. Okay, and it is saying that the arrest is linked to CVD disease, as Elon Musk suggests. That is another sign. Elon Musk's tweet regarding this is in itself a prophetic sign, which I will explain. And that is the story of this link right here. And so that's where we will begin with the Elon Musk sign. So as I wrote, the day after Musk's Twitter change to X, well, you know what? I'm going to pause this video here, and I'm going to go to another video thread or another email thread and give you some more background, just briefly, on the other signs that regard Musk's Twitter change to X, because that is the backdrop to this particular sign. Musk's Twitter tweet regarding Bronny James isn't so relevant without this background information. So I'm just going to pause this video here and then come back to this email thread right here. All right, now, as I was saying, I needed to backtrack to talk a little bit about what had happened just prior to the Elon Musk tweet regarding Bronny James, which was his tweet and announcement that Twitter was changing its name to X. Okay, and this is in conjunction with this Jamie FOXX sign. And probably I don't mention it because I'm talking to people that already know what I'm talking about. We need to establish first that Jamie Foxx, which has X's in his name, is symbolic of 666. Okay, in Bible prophecy, the number 666 is associated with the Antichrist. The word fox hints at that. Not only was Herod in the Bible, King Herod, a fox, and he is a type for the Antichrist, by the way, in the Bible. He's a prophetic foreshadow or prophetic type for the Antichrist. But the name or the word fox hints at 666 because, first of all, the letter F is the sixth letter. And the letter O, let's see, I think it is the, the letter O is the 15th letter, which hints at 1 plus 5 equals 6, the 15th letter in the alphabet. And the letter X is the 24th letter in the alphabet, which hints at 2 plus 4 equals 6. And so that's why Fox hints at 6666. Okay, and that is what God is using Jamie, well, among other things, which will, and in fact, so God's big picture of signs is an interconnected web, and it is infinite and vast. And when you try to explain one part of the web, you end up pulling the entire web. And it's not possible to completely explain Jamie Foxx. It's the God's signs and his prophetic connections and patterns and signs is three-dimensional. And to explain Jamie Foxx would go off onto other tangents, which would take not only lots of more explanation, but that would lead to other branches in the web which would require explanation. And so, in other words, it is extremely difficult to explain God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which, by the way, is only being explained on this channel. So anyway, Jamie Foxx is about a lot of things, but the central focus of Jamie Foxx is his Antichrist symbolism, but also he was born, okay, I'm just going to go off onto the tangent a little bit. He was born on the same calendar date as the Federal Reserve was created, okay? But I can't explain more than that because that would require explaining the other signs surrounding the day that Jamie Foxx became ill, okay? Now, he became ill because, and everyone knows this. Everyone knows this. In fact, their stories came out. There was the Hollywood Insider report, for example, that came out. There was part of the prophetic signs, actually. His interview on the Dr. Oz show, or one of those guys. Anyway, if you don't know, he became ill because of the thing, okay? You know what I'm talking about. The thing that you cannot talk about, okay? Which is why you may not know, because you can't talk about it. And that's why it is the mark of the Antichrist, the snake bite, okay? So, and that's why his last name is 666, because it's the mark of the Antichrist, and he took it, and that's why he became ill. But the reason why his birth date is on the anniversary, and it's prophetic, the number of years from the Federal Reserve creation and on, which I can't get into here, which will be explained in other videos, is because to enforce the mark of the Antichrist coming soon, food will be rationed, and you will not be able to buy it without using the programmable currency from the Federal Reserve, which will restrict people that have not taken it from being able to buy food because of the food shortage coming. Okay? All right, now let's begin. As this NPR article says, just days before Musk officially owned Twitter, he tweeted that he wanted to change the name to Twitter. So we've known all along, since he wanted to take possession of Twitter, that he wanted to change the name to X. To rephrase it, from the time that Musk took possession of Twitter for $44 billion, he wanted to change the name to X. And this hints at H272, the 272nd word in Strong's Hebrew Old Testament Concordance, which is the word for possession. Okay? Luke 12:43, when the unclean spirit has gone out of a person, it passes through waterless places seeking rest, but finds none. Then it says, I will return to my house from which I came, and when it comes, it finds the house empty, swept, and put in order. Then it goes through and brings with it 7 other spirits more evil than itself, and they enter and dwell there, and the last state of that person is worse than the first. So also will it be with this evil generation. Jesus was speaking about that generation of Jews in his time. This is a passage that is in fact a prophecy for America. Since America has turned away from God, it is in the process, and the West for that matter, the countries that knew God, are in the process of becoming demonically possessed. And that's what the mark of the Antichrist is a part of. It is leading to demonic possession. Okay? Now, the reason why Musk bought Twitter in the name of free speech is because the Antichrist, who will be in the name of anti-free speech and censorship, who is already, is the 44th president. That's why he bought it for $44 billion, and everyone knows that number. It's because God is using that as a prophetic sign for those that are paying attention to the anti-free speech guy, the leader of the political cult of the left that is in a totalitarian mass formation movement, the 44th president. Okay. All right. Now, okay. So moving on. Musk announced late Saturday that on Sunday, Twitter would change its logo to X. Oh, I forgot to mention X is symbolic of the mark, because the inverse of the mark of the Antichrist, described in Ezekiel chapter 9, would have been a Tav mark, and in Paleo Hebrew, the Tav mark was an X, and that is why the X is symbolism for the mark of the Antichrist. The 2 eclipses, the one that traversed across America in 2017, and then the one that will cross the path of that totality path in 2024 will cross over it exactly where it peaked, over an area of the country nicknamed Little Egypt, because in the Bible, Egypt is, and the king of Egypt is symbolic of the Antichrist, or rather a type for the Antichrist. These 2 paths of these eclipses will engender a giant X over America, and that will be exactly 4 times 4 days before the predicted beginning of the zombie pandemic. And the 4 times 4 days hints at the 44th Antichrist. Okay, so that's why that's why the big news story at this time, as you will see, regarding how Musk wishes to change the name of Twitter to X. And by the way, Twitter is a bird because the Antichrist will come to power through a plane crash that will be caused due to a bird strike. And that's, by the way, at the time that he bought Twitter for $44 billion, a Tesla car crashed into an airplane on the runway in the state of Washington, the 42nd state to join the Union, and the number 42 is symbolic of the Antichrist in Bible prophecy. Also, Tesla is symbolic of lightning. The Tesla cars run on electricity, and Nikola Tesla is known, or was known, for his experiments involving lightning. And so the car that was the Tesla that crashed into the airplane is symbolic of lightning hitting the airplane, and Kamala Harris's plane will crash due to a lightning strike, and turbulence before the bird strike will hit it. And anyway, so Jesus said that he saw Satan falling like lightning from heaven. And the name Barack Obama in Hebrew means lightning from heaven. Barak means lightning. Bama is the word for high place, which in the Bible is a metaphor for heaven, as it is said that Lucifer fell from the high place, a metaphor for heaven. And in the language Jesus would have spoken, Aramaic, the word for from is O. And so Barack Obama means lightning from heaven, which is what Jesus said. He said he saw Satan falling like lightning from heaven. Either Jesus didn't know what he was saying when he said this, or he knew that there would be a famous president named Barack Obama and said this anyway, knowing that it would confuse us, or he was revealing the identity of the Antichrist. Obviously, the latter option is the only one that makes any sense. And so the point is that when Kamala Harris will fall from the sky in a plane crash due to a lightning strike and then will be replaced by the Antichrist, this will hint at and symbolize Luke 10:18 when Jesus said he saw Satan falling like lightning from heaven, which is why also Elon Musk bought Twitter for the purpose of free speech, which the Antichrist will be against, for $44 billion at the time that this Tesla car slammed or crashed into an airplane. Anyway, Sunday, which was July 23rd, okay, this date, July 23rd, is 272 days, which hints at the word for possession, before what seems to be the beginning of the zombie pandemic, as I was saying. April 20th, 2024. The taking of possession of souls by demons. We already know that the X in SpaceX hints at the mark of the Antichrist. I'll attach an updated diagram, okay? All right, so there you go. So from this, the day that Musk changed Twitter to X just happened to be this date right here. And of all dates, it was a Sunday, which was peculiar in a way. I mean, why a Sunday, right? That's because this date was 272 days before the date of the predicted beginning of the zombie pandemic, which will be the result of taking the mark of the Antichrist, which is symbolized by the letter X, and Musk's involvement with X, including, for example, SpaceX. There are mark of the Antichrist SpaceX signs, in other words, which I can't explain here. Okay. Now, July 23rd is also 111 days, which is the equivalent of 4 times 4 weeks, which hints at the 44th Antichrist, before the date 11/11, the date of the beginning of the alien deception, when aliens pretending to be demons will begin the kickoff event, if you will, to the massive worldwide deception. And this is a test of faith. And everything primarily is for God's church. The purpose of God's creation is for his church, Christians. And the primary purpose of aliens pretending to be demons is that it is a test of faith for quote-unquote Christians that claim to have a biblical worldview. And in general, although you can't say that the statement by itself is accurate, but it is only fundamentalist Christians that will refuse to believe that aliens are, in fact, aliens and not demons, and fall for the deception. And so, in other words, this is designed by God to weed out the Christians that didn't really care about the truth and didn't really have a biblical worldview. Because, obviously, if God became a man and died for man's sin through dying on the cross, there aren't aliens that furthermore are more intelligent than man or more advanced, etc. Earth and man is the center of God's creation, and that is the biblical worldview. If you don't believe that, and if you will fall for aliens, you didn't really live your life as if you really believed. In other words, that's like the gist of why this is a test of faith. Which is why, for example, vast numbers, the great majority of, for example, of Catholics, supposed Christians, will fall for this deception. Catholics have already fallen for deception. If you were really interested in truth, you wouldn't be a Catholic. You are more interested in tribalism and tradition, which you find appealing, and not the Bible, you are interested in this man-made religion on top of the Bible, which is what Catholicism is. And that's just for example. And that doesn't mean that there aren't Protestants that won't fall for this, of course. And those will be the ones that didn't really have a biblical worldview and didn't really believe. And this is why this test of faith that is aliens. Okay? In fact, the vast majority of evangelical Christians today also are open-minded to the existence of aliens. And that is a sad statement for the state of the church today. That is in other words, that is indicative of the sorry state of the church today, for which Jesus and God are very displeased. And that is why the end times are happening now, is because it is judgment for the church. The church isn't being the church, in other words. Okay, so enough of that subject there. Okay, so July 23rd, as I was saying, okay, so it's that many days. So the 111 days hints at the date 1111. That's the confirmation, the second witness to this. And that's how God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works. It works on the principle of second and third and multiple witnesses confirming a matter, as the Bible says is required. And that's what makes what is being explained on this channel true and not a product of one's imagination, and different and unique than everything else on the internet that claims to be an analysis of God's prophetic signs. Okay, and so this 272 days before what seems to be the beginning, oh, sorry, I said that already. Okay, so in turn, November 11th, the date of the beginning of the alien deception, is 32 days to December 13th, 2023. Okay, and that's the anniversary of the Federal Reserve, by the way. And the reason why I don't mention it in this paragraph is because those that I'm talking to already know that. And this date here is in turn 129 days to the date of the beginning of the zombie pandemic. Okay, so we know that 32 hints at the 32nd prime number, 131, which hints at G131, which is the word for blood disease, which is what a person gets after they have taken the mark of the Antichrist. And we now know that 129 hints at G129, which is the word for blood. Among many other connections, December 13th, 2023 is the 110th anniversary of the Federal Reserve, which, as I said, will create the digital currency that will be programmed so that those that don't take the mark of the Antichrist will not be able to buy the rationed food, as is described in Bible prophecy. The number 110 is extremely prophetic. I won't explain it here. It is one of the main numbers in God's big picture of signs, patterns, and connections. But what I will explain is this. From this date we are talking about, when Musk changed Twitter to X, it is 32 days followed by 29 days to the beginning of the zombie pandemic, okay, which will be the result of taking the X, the mark of the Antichrist, the thing that people put inside themselves. And the connection hints at blood disease and blood, as I just explained. And so that's profound, okay? Again, we have this X sign that connects with the words blood disease and blood to the beginning of the zombie pandemic, which will be the result of taking the X. Okay? All right. Recall, December 13th connects to Pope Francis and Jamie FOXX and other things. Okay? So this was, Pope Francis was made a priest. I forget the Catholic word for that, when they make someone a priest, on this date. And that's explained in another video, okay? Why that's important. And it was I'm not going to go into it. Jamie FOXX posted his first social media post since his illness on July 21st, 2023. Like Musk's tweet about X, it was late at night and the news reported the story the following day on July 22nd, 2023. And so that's what makes this date relevant to this Jamie Foxx sign, is because the story of his tweet, which is the sign, wasn't reported until the following day because he tweeted it late at night. Okay? July 22nd, 2023 was 14 weeks and 4 days after his illness due to the X, the thing people put inside themselves, on April 11th, 2023. The date for 11 hints at 4 times 11 equals 44 and $44 billion that Musk paid for Twitter. Okay, now let's see. Okay, July 22nd, the date of the report of Jamie Foxx's tweet, is in turn 144 days to December 13th, 2023. FOXX, which hints at 6666, as I explained, became ill 14 weeks and 4 days, followed by 144 days to his birth date on July 13th, 2023. The 14 weeks and 4 days hints at 144 and confirms the 144 days. And 144 is, of course, if you don't know, a very important number in the book of Revelation for the end times period regarding God's faithful that will be rescued from the Antichrist and the persecution through the mark of the Antichrist, the X. Okay. I hope you can picture that. It's not in a diagram, but the day that he got ill is 14 weeks and 4 days, followed by 144 days. But the 14 weeks and 4 days brings us to this date here, which is when he tweeted for the first time. And then from the day he tweeted the story, it is 144 days to his prophetic birth date, which means something. I don't know exactly what it means, okay? I'm torn between two speculative theories, which is that this will be the day related somehow to the programmable currency from the Federal Reserve, or it's more related to Pope Francis and possibly the coming massive Mary apparition, demonic deception, because all Mary ghosts, all of them, period, have all been demons pretending to be Mary. And if you have a correct biblical worldview and you have an understanding of the gospel, which the vast majority of Catholics do not have, then you will know and be able to discern very easily that what these demons pretending to be Mary have said in the past is clearly demonic deception to fool people that do not understand the Bible and furthermore do not care enough to learn and read the Bible and understand it, like most Catholics. And that's why Mary ghosts. They're pretending to be Mary because they're gullible. They don't understand the Bible or have a biblical worldview, or understand the gospel for that matter. Okay? They have a very superficial understanding of the Bible and the gospel. And they are confused with all of the other deception that the man-made tradition that is Catholicism has placed on top of the Bible, which the demons pretending to be Mary prey on. Okay? Musk posted about X on July 22nd, and the news reported about FOXX on July 22nd. And Musk and FOXX hints at XXX, okay, and 666, okay, and the mark of the Antichrist, because that's why he got ill, from taking the mark of the Antichrist. On July 22nd, Musk posted about the company he bought for $44 billion, and this is exactly 4 times 4 weeks before the alien deception on November 11th. The news reported about FOXX 4 times 4 weeks before November 11th. And the date he became ill, 4/11, hints at 44. Okay, he became ill on the date 4/11, which hints at 44, and it is 4 times 4 weeks from FOXX's tweet story to the demonic alien deception. And of course, the aliens will be promoting the mark of the Antichrist and much more. All right, so here is the diagram that I was talking to them about. Here's that 32 days and 129 days. This hints at the blood disease, and this hints at the word blood, as I was explaining. This is the day of the demonic deception. This is the day of the alien. This is the day of the beginning of the zombie pandemic. This is the day of the beginning kickoff event of the alien deception of demons pretending to be aliens. This is also the equivalent of 23 weeks exactly, which is almost exactly 44% of a year, and God frequently uses 23 weeks connections for this reason, because God, for one thing, pairs 23 and 44 together to confirm the signs and connections. And as I mentioned earlier, God's signs, patterns, and connections works on the principle of second and third witnesses in one simple way, in which he would provide a second witness is through pairing certain numbers together. And he frequently pairs 23 and 44 together because the 44th president, the basketball president, wore jersey number 23 when he played basketball in high school. And that is just scratching the surface for why God pairs 23 and 44 together. Okay? Now, if you are really into it, you can pause this video and try to study this diagram on your own, but it will be explained in upcoming videos. The day after Musk's Twitter change to X, or tweet to change X to X, on July 23rd, which was the day after. Okay, so like Jamie Foxx's tweet, Musk's tweet was late at night, and so it was reported the next day. But also, Musk was tweeting specifically about the following day as being the day to change Twitter to X. And that was July 23rd. Okay? On this same day, the son of the two basketball goats, greatest of all time, okay, two goats are used in the Bible on the Day of Atonement by the ancient Jews in a ritual sacrifice on the Temple Mount. And goat in the Bible is symbolic of the Antichrist, who will be on the Temple Mount in the end times. Okay? So there's two goats of basketball that God is using. They both wore jersey number 23. That's because I'm talking about Michael Jordan and LeBron James, and that's because the Antichrist goat wore jersey number 23 when he played basketball in high school. Now, and that's why this is important. The son of one of these two goats became ill on this date. He collapsed. He had a cardiac arrest while playing basketball, this young man, which shouldn't have happened. And the news of this was learned on July 25th. And out of this is a story, a news story regarding the reaction to Musk's tweet that LeBron James's son had a heart attack because of taking the mark, the thing, because of taking the thing that people put inside themselves. And so, okay, which is the mark of the Antichrist and is symbolized by X. Okay. Anyway, what I'm doing here, what God is doing, is he's tying Musk's sign involving changing Twitter to X, and he's tying it into this other sign here regarding this basketball player that collapsed because he took the X. Okay, and Musk tweeting about, because the controversy here is how Musk tweeted that LeBron James's son collapsed because he took the X. Okay, and that's why they tie together. So Musk tweets about changing to X, And then a couple of days later, he tweets about the goat's sun collapsing due to having taken the X. Okay? So it's simple there, right? That's why the dates are connected. Because the tweet about his son taking the X is the 25th, and then he changed Twitter to X on the 23rd. Okay? The prophetic jersey number for the GOAT, greatest of all time, LeBron James, is 23. God pairs 23 and 9 together to confirm the signs and connections. One reason being, among many, is that the Antichrist became the president in 2009, will become the president again in 2023. He will become the 48th president on November 19th. That is a prediction. And he wore jersey number 23 when he played basketball in high school, the basketball president. The news of James's son, James also wore 23, and Musk's tweet, Musk is 44, by the way, because he bought Twitter for $44 billion, on July 25th. This date is exactly 90 plus 90 plus 90 days before the predicted beginning of the zombie pandemic on April 20th, 2023, which will be 4 plus 4 plus 4 days after the eclipse over America that will engender an X over America. So I got that wrong before, by the way. I apologize. It's not 4 times 4 days. It's 4 plus 4 plus 4 days, which gives us the same symbolism that hints at the Antichrist, the 44th president, who will enforce the X. Okay, so this connection of 90 plus 90 plus 90 days to April 20th pairs with the 44 from Musk on this date, because he bought Twitter for $44 billion. And that's another 2 numbers that God pairs together. Actually, he pairs the number 9 with a few numbers. Because the number 9 is the most important number in God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel, as from the Bible, it symbolizes God's judgment. Okay? So he's pairing 9 and 44 here together. So the eclipse on April 8th, 2024 will be 258 days after the news of LeBron James's son and Musk's tweet, which, as explained in the last email, ties to the news of Musk changing Twitter to X, and the news of Jamie FOXX, which is 6666. The 258th word in Strong's Greek New Testament Concordance is the word FOXX, which hints at 666. F, the 6th letter, O, the 15th, and X, the 24th, as I explained. Jamie FOXX hints at Musk's X, because that's why he got sick, but also that's why his name is X666. And his name is FOXX with 2 X's. And James's, okay, which ties to Jamie FOXX, son, goat son, which is the Antichrist. Antichrist is the son of Satan, ties this to the X over America with 258 days that hints at the word for fox. Okay? So just to repeat that. So on July 25th, we have the signs that tie in Musk, which, as I explained, ties into Jamie FOXX, and Musk's tweet about change to Twitter to X, it connects to the 25th because Musk tweeted about the X regarding LeBron James's son, who got sick because of the X. And this date, July 25th, is 258 days, which hints at the word fox, which is, by the way, includes an X in it, to the date of the eclipse in 2024, which will cross over the path of the other eclipse, which will engender a giant X over America. So if you got that, you'll recognize how profound that is. Okay. And then, in turn, these signs tie to the predicted zombie pandemic 4 plus 4 plus 4 days later. And Musk bought Twitter for $44 billion. Okay? what is stunning confirmation of all of this is that also on September 25th, the S&P 500, okay, now the stock market index, the S&P 500, God uses in prophetic signs to hint at the 500th word in Strong's Greek New Testament Concordance, which is the word for Antichrist. Okay, and so on this 725 date, with these Mark X, Mark of the Antichrist signs, as I've been explaining, the S&P 500 closed at 4,567. Okay? 0.46. I knew that the stock market had climbed to this in order to point to 4,567. And sure enough, it has. 4,567 in the S&P 500, which hints at Antichrist, hints at the 4,567th word in the Greek New Testament Concordance, which is the word for Satan. The 0.46 in the 4,567.46 close on July 25th hints at the number 46 and 46 chromosomes. 23 pairs of chromosomes form an X. LeBron James, who wore jersey 23, has a Nike shoe in his name that is named 23 chromosomes. And the print pattern on the shoe is snake skin. This is because the X, the mark of the Antichrist, is snake venom, and that's a subject for another video, but the prediction being made in this video will prove this, and that is the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction. Make no mistake. The reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction is to prove these fundamental but controversial things that have been proven through God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel. This is the reason for this prediction from God. And so, I don't have to explain it to you. It is a fact. I will explain it to you in the other videos, however, but it's not necessary. If you are reasonable and not irrational, because when this prediction comes to pass, will recognize that I have the authority to say that it is fact, because this is proven in God's big picture of signs, which I understand after studying it from morning until night for more than 5 years, almost 6 years. Well, actually about 6 years now. So, it is a fact. It is snake venom. And it is the mark of the Antichrist in its current form. It doesn't need an additional something, such as a technology or false religious worship of some form, like a worship of a statue to go with it. That's a misunderstanding of that passage in the first place. There won't be any worship of statues. Okay? And that is explained already in the snake bite video. Make sure you watch the snake bite video. If this doesn't agree with your understanding of Bible prophecy, it is because you don't have a correct understanding of these prophecies. And the objections that you have, and I know the common ones, but I can't explain it in every video, are explained. The reasons why the common objections that you have are not true are explained in the snake bite video. Make sure you watch the snake bite video. Okay, so the snake bite that's what it is. I mean, literally, it's synthesized snake venom. But it affects a person's chromosomes. That's what's going on with the thing. And people have 23 pairs of them, 46 in total, which is why on this date of this X symbolism, with the son of LeBron James, who wore jersey 23 and has a shoe that's named 23 chromosomes. His sun collapsed on this day, and Musk tweeted the truth about it, which is why God used Musk in this sign. And in his signs, and this was the day that the S&P closed at 4,567.46. The 4,567 hints at Satan, and the 46 hints at 46 chromosomes. It's so astounding. And on top of that, this day connects with the number of days that hints at FOXX, an X to the date of the X over America, which is for the purpose of symbolism for the mark of the Antichrist, the X, the thing, which is 4 plus 4 days to the zombie pandemic. And that in turn, the zombie pandemic is 90 plus 90 plus 90 days exactly after the day that LeBron James's sun collapsed. Come full circle, right? That's full circle there, if you caught that. From this 725 date, 250 days to the X over America, 4 plus 4 days to the zombie pandemic, which is 90 plus 90 days after 725. And 90 plus 90 plus 90 days, by the way, I didn't mention because it was obvious to those that I'm writing to, is also in itself an emphasis of the number 9, which again is the most important number in God's big picture of signs, as from the Bible it symbolizes God's judgment. But as I explained also, it hints at, or rather pairs with the 23 and the 44. It pairs with this 44 too, by the way, but it also pairs with Musk, who bought Twitter for $44 billion. So, okay, so that's full circle there. And in other words, this is amazing confirmation that the thing is the mark. It is the X, the thing that we can't talk about. All right, so now we've done that email thread. I'm returning back to the email thread that I began this video with. It's really just a continuation though. So let's begin. All right, first, some typos are fixed in this paragraph from yesterday. I'm just going to quickly read it again because this is very important. What is a stunning confirmation of all of this is that on 7/25, the S&P 500 index closed at 4,567.46. I knew that the stock market had climbed to this level in order to point to 4,566, and sure enough, it did. It has. I knew in advance, in other words, that would happen. Now, I knew in advance that was what was happening. G 4,567 is the word for Satan. The 0.46 in 4,567.46 hints at 46 chromosomes. 23 pairs of chromosomes form an X. LeBron James, who wore jersey 23, has a Nike shoe in his name that is named 23 chromosomes, and the print of the shoe is of snakeskin. The thing is snake venom that affects a person's chromosomes. This G 4,567.46, which hints at 2 times 23 chromosomes, sign on 7/25, was the same day as the news of LeBron James's 23, because he wore jersey 23, son and Musk X tweet. Musk hints at X, and he tweeted about LeBron James's son. After the Musk and FOXX sign, and because of the X's, and as I explained, and connects with 258 days to the X over America, which is the word for Fox, which hints at X, and 666, which is 444 days to the zombie pandemic. This is a typo here. It should say pandemic, not eclipse, which is 90 plus 90 plus 90 days after LeBron James's sun collapsed and Musk's tweet regarding that. Okay, so this is the really, really profound new information here regarding this. The bigger picture here, once again, is that through the signs earlier this year, God has been demonstrating or illustrating a theme of the cup of iniquity overflowing. This theme incorporated the S&P 500's flirtation with the 4,200 level and debt ceiling crisis signs. Okay, so for a long time, this is explained in other videos. I can't explain it here in good detail, but For a long time, the S&P 500 was hovering underneath this 4,200 level that it hadn't surpassed in many months. And the stock market news stories were talking about this. This coincided at the same time with the climax to the debt ceiling crisis. And all of this was symbolism for the debt, which is sin, the debt of man to Satan is sin, for which the payment must be paid to Satan. Those that have a theology, atonement theology that is the satisfaction model, where they think that Jesus' payment was to satisfy somehow God's angry wrath. It's unfortunate, and it is unfortunate that that's the message that non-Christians hear, because that's not a good message, in my opinion. It's going to make someone understand the atonement and furthermore understand God, and rightly so. It's not this model of the atonement became popular in the 12th century, and anyway, I'm not going to get into it, but it's not correct. The payment was made to Satan, the captor of those that have sinned, and Jesus paid the ransom that was owed, and we are now free to leave and follow Jesus if we choose to. Anyway, I got sidetracked there, but that was important because that's really the gospel there. 4,200 is symbolic of the number of the Antichrist in Bible prophecy, the number 42. And so anyway, that's what the debt ceiling crisis in conjunction with all of these signs was about. And finally, after a long period, it finally crossed the 4,200 level in a dramatic fashion, which was illustrated through prophetic signs, which is explained in other videos. And so from there, I had a feeling that God was directing the S&P 500 up to the 4,567 level as being the next level. But it was in order to illustrate this cup of iniquity overflowing, which is this symbolism in the Bible. God patiently waits for a nation or a people's cup of iniquity, a cup of sin, to overflow before destroying it in his judgment. And so this 4,200 level, coinciding with the maximum of the debt ceiling, was symbolic of this maximum of sin and the cup of iniquity analogy. Okay, and so that's that. I had speculated to myself that perhaps this illustration of the cup of iniquity overflowing, with the S&P finally crossing the 4,200 level because of the 42 months in the Antichrist and the Bible prophecy level, would take the S&P to 4,567 points. This is because G500 is the word for Antichrist, which is what is hinted at with S&P 500, and G4,567 is the word for Satan. In November of 2021, the S&P closed at 4,567.00, and I had predicted it would do this many days before it did. I didn't know that it would close at exactly 00. That was the shocker for me, because that it was that precise. But I knew that there would be a day that the S&P would close at 4,567, because that is the word for Satan. And then it did. That was in November of 2021. Okay? This is the huge thing. It closed at 4,567.00 on the day that Marcus Lamb died. This famous televangelist who was famous for warning about the mark, the thing. Okay, that's what he was famous for in the end, in his last days. And his name hints at Mark. And his last name is Lamb, because all of this is what I'm saying, the theme of God's big picture of signs, and furthermore the end times, is judgment for the church. As Peter warned, judgment begins with the church. The reason for the Antichrist is that he is a test of faith for the church. And so anyway, that's why his name is Mark Aslam. It's confirmation that what he was warning about was the mark. Okay? Now, the thing is, this time on 7/25/2023, it closed at 4,567.46 because the 0.46 reveals that the thing that people put inside themselves changes a person's 46 chromosomes, which is what makes it a spiritual abomination, by the way. Okay, and Marcus Lamb died on the date November 30th, 2021. Okay, this date was the day that the S&P 500, which hints at Antichrist, closed at 4,567.00, which hints at Satan. This was exactly 86 weeks before July 25th, when LeBron James's son collapsed after having taken the thing, and Musk tweeted it was because he took the thing. And Musk had just tweeted about X. And the day that the S&P closed at 4,567.46. Okay, I'll just say that again. From the day that it closed at 4,567.00 in November of 2021, on the day that Mark Aslam died, it is exactly 86 weeks to this day that it closed at 4,567.46, because this hints at, oh, and by the way, chromosomes paired together make an X, right? And again, the mark of the Antichrist is described in Ezekiel chapter 9, and there are 23 pairs, and that's another reason why God pairs 9 and 23, which I mentioned earlier. Okay, and on this day was the day that LeBron James, number 23, his son collapsed due to having taken the X, and Musk tweeted about it, and he had just changed Twitter to X, which hints at the mark. Because again, the inverse of the mark in Ezekiel chapter 9 is an X, the Tav mark. Okay, so this connection between these two S&P 500 dates in which it closed at 4,567 is exactly 86 weeks. And here is the jaw-dropping thing. This is because 86 weeks hints at G86, the 86th word in Strong's Greek New Testament Concordance, which is the word for Hades and hell, which Bible prophecy tells us those that take the mark are going to. It's where they are headed. Now, I do believe that it is possible to repent. There is no passage in the Bible that says you cannot, which would explain why so many Christians, quote unquote, have already taken the mark. But it was judgment for them. It was judgment for many things, including their doctrine, including dispensationalism, for example, which says it couldn't possibly be the mark because of their presuppositions regarding dispensationalism, which is tied into other false theology, which is sovereign grace and free grace. Okay, that's why dispensationalism is tied to that, and it is the Nicolaitan doctrine that Jesus said he hates and is coming to make war on with the sword of his mouth on those that teach and have the works that are a product of this doctrine. And so if you believe that this couldn't happen because such and such didn't happen yet, and all Christians will be raptured before the mark and all of that, that's because the reason why you took it is because it's judgment for that belief. That's why. Sorry to say. But anyway, I believe you can repent. But anyway, again, we've got this 86 weeks exact connection, and it's because the 86th word is Hades and hell, which is the location that people will go after having taken the mark. And the 86th word in Hebrew concordance, Strong's Hebrew Old Testament concordance, is the word to kneel, to bow the knee, as in to bow the knee to Satan, which is why it is 86 weeks in between these two numbers that hint at Satan, because G 4567 is the word for Satan. It doesn't get any clearer than this. The current thing for the CVD disease is the mark of the Antichrist. Case closed. End of debate. No more controversy. And if you didn't already, if this wasn't enough to convince you somehow, the prediction should do so, because that, again, is the purpose of the prediction. Believe me, I know far better than you the reason why God is doing all of this. The reason why he is doing all of this and the reason for this prediction is not for entertainment. It is to prove what I am saying. That's how prophecy works. It's the reason why 1/3 of the Bible is prophecy, once again, as I mentioned earlier. The reason why this prediction is from God and why God has given me a voice through this prediction is to prove to you that the thing is the mark of the Antichrist. There is no more debate. If there were to continue to be a debate regarding this, there would be zero purpose for the prediction and no purpose for this video or video channel. Make no mistake. It occurred to me to check the intraday high in the S&P on 7/25. It was 4,580. It turns out that G580 is the word for a throwing away, a casting away, rejection. This is the exact symbolism to be expected at this peak in the stock market after God had demonstrated a cup of iniquity overflowing from the 4,200 level. God is rejecting and casting off America now because its cup of iniquity is overflowing. Given this 580 number, and given the recent understanding regarding the number 58, as explained in recent emails, the importance of the date 5/8 came to mind because of its importance for the stock market. Again, 5/8, May 8th, was the date that the report was published regarding how Manhattan Island is sinking under the ocean, which is Noah's flood symbolism. It was also the day of the mysterious Chinese spaceship landing after 276 days in space. A ship is symbolic of Noah's Ark, and it was 276 souls that were shipwrecked in the book of Acts. Again, 276 is the 23rd triangular number. By the way, 276 is one of the 3 unusually specific numbers in the Bible. It is very prophetic. But it is also the 23rd triangular number, which means in a triangle of numbers, the last number in the 23rd row is 276. And the date 5/8, again, as I'm saying to my friends who have written to this about before, hints at 5 divided by 8 equals 1.6, which equals 4 times 0.40, which hints at 44, and thus this pairs 23 which pairs 23 and 44. Okay, because the date was 5/8 and the mysterious Chinese ship had been in space for 276 days, which gives us the number 23, and the date gives us 44. And that's why it pairs 23 and 44, which confirms the signs and connections, because again, that's how God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works. It works on the principle of second and third and multiple witnesses confirming a matter, and that's what makes it true and not a product of one's imagination and different than unique than everything else on the internet that claims to be an analysis of God's prophetic signs. And this was exactly 44 months, this 5/8 date, which hints at 44. It was, and the number 23. It was exactly 44 months after the cargo ship capsized, the Golden Ray cargo ship capsized off the coast of the 4th state to join the Union, and Jekyll Island, where the Federal Reserve was created, when it had 4,000 vehicles on it and 23 men on board. And also 4 people trapped on the 4th deck and had to be rescued, and that's explained in another video. It occurred to me that to check the connection between 5/8 and the date that the S&P made an intraday high at 4,580, which was the date 7/25, the date that it closed 4,567.46. So the connection is 2 months and 17 days. This was very interesting in light of the Noah's flood symbolism just mentioned. Again, the spaceship hints at ship, and that hints at Noah's Ark in the Noah's flood. And it connects with 44 months to the other ship, the cargo ship, which capsized, which is Noah's flood symbolism. And 5/8 was the date of the report published, scientific report regarding how Manhattan Island is sinking under the ocean, which is serious Noah's flood symbolism. And the cargo ship hints at trade and finance because of the Jekyll Island and the trade. And Manhattan, of course, is where the capital of international trade and finance and the New York Stock Exchange, the World Trade Center, right? So, okay, so this 5/8 data has all kinds of Noah's flood symbolism and stock market finance symbolism connected to it. And it connects with 2 months and 17 days from this 5/8 date, okay, to 7/25, which is the day of the stock market sign, okay? Which, again, because of the intraday high on that day, peak, because that's where it's going to, a peak after passing the maximum cup of iniquity level, 4,200. Okay, so it's 2 months and 17 days, which is very interesting in light of the Noah's flood symbolism just mentioned on the date 5/8. As the flood began on the 17th day of the second month in the Hebrew calendar. So I wondered if it was possible that 5/8, 2023 was in fact the date 217 in the Hebrew calendar. It turns out that it was. Exclamation marks. That's so astounding that because I just had a Holy Spirit intuitive sense that maybe this was the case. And so I checked, and it was. It's amazing. And so in other words, this cargo ship connects to this Antichrist sign here on September 25th, the cargo ship that capsized in September of 2019. It connects profoundly to this date here. And the cargo ship is about trade and the collapse of the financial system, the modern financial system which was created on Jekyll Island, and the Federal Reserve, which was created on Jekyll Island, will be involved in the mark of the Antichrist through its programmable currency that will restrict people from buying food if they have not taken the mark. In the early morning on a sunny, cloudless day in New York City on July 26th, the day after the day we were talking about with the close I was just talking about, before Wall Street opened. So it was early in the morning on a sunny, cloudless day, July 26th, before Wall Street opened, and while the Dow was still closed at the numbers from the day before, the stock market, when the S&P closed at 4,567.46, a crane caught on fire and then a while later collapsed and crashed to the ground. This scene was reminiscent of the fires in the higher floors of the Twin Towers in the morning of the sunny, cloudless day on 9/11 before they collapsed and crashed to the ground. This crane accident injured 11 people, 9 civilians, and 2 New York Fire Department firefighters. This hinted at the deaths on 9/11, including the New York Fire Department firefighters, because 9 civilians and a total of 11 people hints at 9/11. The story of this crane accident involves its location and the street blocks that were closed during the fire and after the collapse. It was 10th Avenue and 41st Street. People were advised to stay clear between 10th and 11th Avenues and 41st and 42nd Streets. The crane accident on July 26 was 141 weeks and 1 day after 9/11 in 2001. 10th and 11th Avenue and 41st Street hints at 141 weeks and 1 day. Because in 141 weeks and 1 day, we have 3 1s and a 4. And that's what we have with 41st Street and 10th and 11th Avenue, right? And so I will explain why that's important. It was part of the news story. Okay, so it was part of the news story about how the location was near the entrance of the Lincoln Tunnel. Okay, this date, 7/26, when the crane collapsed near the entrance to the Lincoln Tunnel, was 97 years after the last son of President Lincoln died. Okay, so Mary Todd and Abraham Lincoln, their last son, died on the date 7/26 in 1926. And it was exactly 97 years before this crane accident right near the entrance of the Lincoln Tunnel. The prophetic signs on the date 5/4/2023 pointed to Lincoln's National Day of Prayer and his Proclamation 97. This was a huge, very important date, the date 5/4, which is explained in the other videos. Make sure you watch them. It hints at the 54th Massachusetts Regiment. And this happened to be, although it wasn't known ahead of time, it was known that God was pointing to this date ahead of time, and that it would be because of the 54th Massachusetts Regiment, but it wasn't known ahead of time that it was the National Day of Prayer, which was instituted by Abraham Lincoln with his Proclamation 97. And that's why this 7/26 date is 97 years exactly after the death of Abraham Lincoln's last son. Okay, it's spiritual death symbolism for one thing, for the nation, but let me see if I explain it here. The signs on 5/4 point to the 54th Massachusetts Regiment, the first black regiment for Abraham Lincoln that was pivotal in winning the Civil War, the introduction of black soldiers. And, okay, well, there's more to it. Let's see, do I talk about it later? No, probably not, because the people I'm talking to already know what I'm talking about, right? Okay, so the 54th Massachusetts Regiment is very, very important in history, but also God's prophetic signs. For one thing, it's about the Civil War. And the Civil War was about freedom and slavery. And this theme of slavery and freedom is the theme of the Bible. And it is the theme of life. The 54th Massachusetts Regiment is also well known for how it wasn't paid by official policy from Washington the equivalent of what the white Union soldiers were paid, which was $13 a month. They were discriminated against. It was oppressive minority laws, which is what happens in socialism and leftist societies, which is where we are and where we are ever more headed to. The left is evil because collectivism is evil, because it's about the group identity at the cost of the individual, and always leads to oppression of the minority and the trampling of civil rights that were given to us by God so that we could live out God's purpose for our lives. That's the reason for freedom and why God gave us these freedoms that are inalienable and are God-given. The founders had the wisdom to recognize that this was the case through their biblical literacy, through their understanding of the Bible, which they understood well. And they all understood, even the ones that weren't very religious, such as Benjamin Franklin, they all understood that a democracy could only be had by a moral and religious people. As John Adams said, any other democracy is wholly inadequate or incompatible with any other people. And that's why we are losing our democracy today, even though it is the left, because they are deceived by Satan, that thinks it's the opposite. They are so far 180 degrees opposite of understanding the truth. Okay? And so that's the theme of the 54th Massachusetts Regiment. The reason why it was $13 is because it hints at the 13th Amendment, which was the amendment that abolished slavery by Abraham Lincoln. Okay, and so God pointed to this National Day of Prayer. It must be read. I should even maybe read it in this video, but I'm sure I'll read it in another video, right? Which is more appropriate for it. But go type it in, the Proclamation 97. It is what is going on with God's big picture of signs. Abraham Lincoln was warning that if we were to lose our way with God, we would lose what we have as a nation and our freedoms, which is exactly what is happening and was inevitable, as the founders knew, rightly. Okay? And so anyway, the $13 also hints at currency and the Federal Reserve's programmable currency, like I am saying, which will be used to enforce the mark of the Antichrist. And again, the Antichrist is judgment on the nation. America's Gentile Christian nation that has turned away from God and so is now being judged through the Antichrist and through the mark of the Antichrist. Okay? So that's the huge importance of Lincoln in this and the 54th Massachusetts Regiment. Now, again, this was 97 years exactly after his last son died, and 97 hints at his Proclamation 97. This National Day of Prayer that pointed to Lincoln's Proclamation 97 on 5/4 is exactly 2 months and 22 days before this crane sign near the entrance to the Lincoln Tunnel. 2 months and 22 days not only hints at the second coming of Christ, and not only the mark of the Antichrist, which is why Abraham Lincoln and the $13 of the 54th Massachusetts Regiment, as I just explained, the theme of slavery and freedom, which is what the Antichrist will bring, slavery. Socialism, which is slavery. It is what it is. That's what it is. It bonds, it creates bondage of people to the state. Dependency. That's what socialism is for. That's why it's evil. It creates dependency on the state, which leads to bondage and servitude and loss of freedom. And not being able to, for example, speak against the official narrative, which is the case today. And why I can't say the word, for example, of what the thing is. Just for example. Okay, and so, what was I saying now? 2 months and 22 days. It also hints at the other man that God has used as symbolism for this warning, this very warning that if the nation were to turn away from God, it would lose its divine protection and blessings, which is what George Washington said inside Trinity Chapel in Lower Manhattan after his first inauguration when he consecrated the nation to God. And that's why Trinity Chapel is known today as the Miracle Chapel, because it was the only building at Ground Zero that survived the falling debris and did so without even a broken window, because God was pointing to it and George Washington, who was born on the date 2/22, which is what 2 months and 22 days hints at. So God has overlapped this theme of this warning through these two presidents from the May 4th date to this crane sign on July 26th near the entrance of the Lincoln Tunnel. Okay? All right. The tower that the crane was building is to be 54 floors high. And so that's amazing. That's more amazing confirmation that God is pointing to the 54th Massachusetts Regiment through this connection to Abraham Lincoln and the date 5-4 that I just explained. The crane dropped to the ground 16 tons of concrete that it was lifting at the time of the accident. 16 tons of concrete hints at the 16th president, Abraham Lincoln. It also hints at the Antichrist, by the way, the 44th president, who will enforce the mark of the Antichrist, which is what is hinted at through Abraham Lincoln, through the Civil War, slavery and freedom, and the 54th Massachusetts Regiment, because 16 is 4 times 4. The crane collapsed from 45 stories above the ground. The crane was building a tower in Manhattan, and the 45th president, who is from Manhattan, is known for building Trump Tower in Manhattan. The crane accident was on 10th and 11th Avenues and 41st Street, and it occurred 141 weeks and 1 day after 9/11, when Trump called into the local news channel and mentioned how his tower in Lower Manhattan had become the tallest. This crane fell from 45 floors above the ground on 10th and 11th Avenues on 41st Street 104 days before it is predicted that the 45th president will fall and die from a heart attack on November 7th, 2023. It will be the last Trump sign, which will hint at the phrase the Apostle Paul used regarding the rapture. This is why this crane fell from 45 stories above the ground on the date 726, which hints at G726, the 726th word in Strong's Greek New Testament Concordance, the Greek word for rapture. And on or in the rapture, God's faithful, as it says in Bible prophecy, will be lifted up high above the ground and will meet the Lord in the clouds, which is what is hinted at with this high level of 45 floors. Okay, so Paul is talking about the sounding of the trump, and there's a phrase, the last trump, that Paul uses regarding the rapture, and that's why the last prophetic sign, because the big sign of all is President Trump that God has been using to trumpet and highlight his prophetic signs. This will be the last Trump sign. Okay, and so that's why it connects with this rapture date, this date that symbolizes the rapture, which is 104 days, which hints at the other connection back from this date to 9/11, when Trump called in on 9/11, the biggest judgment warning sign of all, when he talked about his tower. And we're talking about a crane sign, which is a tower sign. Furthermore, the crane crashed into the adjacent tower, which was also reminiscent of 9/11, by the way, because of the crashing into the other tower with the crane. Okay. The reason for this 141 weeks and 1 day connection, that is followed by 104 days connection, is that this hints at two things. It hints at the number 14, and it hints at 11 times 4 equals 44. Shortly after 9/11, a Maasai tribe in Kenya famously donated 14 cows to America after hearing about the tragedy, in order to help Americans. Okay, this is a big news story. You might have heard about it. It was very famous, a worldwide news story regarding how this primitive Maasai tribe in Kenya, after someone had, returned to their tribe and told them about what had happened, they don't know what a tower is, they don't know what's going on. So They donated 14 cows. That's what they know. That represents great wealth for them. So they donated 14 cows to America. Naturally, the rest of the world thought it was very sweet, and it became a viral news story. Okay, in the Bible, the king of Egypt had Joseph interpret his dream about 14 cows. So that's amazing that the number of cows is 14, because of course it's all spiritual. It's all by God's design. The 14 cows, it's not 15 cows, it's not 13 cows, it's not 10 cows, it's not a dozen cows. It's 14 cows because in the Bible there are 14 cows in the king of Egypt's dream. So God used Joseph to inform the Egyptian king that the 2 sets of 7 cows represented 7 years of prosperity, followed by 7 years of famine. In Bible prophecy, the end times period of the Antichrist's rule is symbolized by 7 years in Daniel chapter 9. But it is only symbolic. We are well within the 7 years, which began, the symbolic 7 years began in 2017. And the purpose of this prediction being made in this video, that is from God, is to prove this. Case closed. End of controversy. This 7 years is mentioned in a prophecy in the book of Daniel, and this 7 years follows a completed 69 sets of 7 years. This is why the Antichrist king, as in the Egyptian king, who is a type for the Antichrist in the Bible, Barack Obama, the American Pharaoh, which is why the American Pharaoh Triple Crown winner, by the way, who was the first Triple Crown winner exactly 444 months after the previous Triple Crown winner, because it's the 44th president, who is the American Pharaoh. Barack Obama, the Antichrist king, the Egyptian Antichrist king, spoke at the opening of the 69th UN General Assembly, as in 69 years, as in 69 sets of 7 years in this most central prophecy in the Bible. The 69th UN General Assembly, Barack Obama spoke at the opening of it on the same day as the birth of one of the 2 famous cows with the number 7 on its forehead. Okay, so I'm just going to now show you a picture of the cows because you need to see what I'm talking about. All right, so here you can see these cows, these 2 famous cows. This one was reported by Reuters. It was an international news story. And it was a big thing. In fact, this cow led to, because it was born near Pittsburgh, not by accident. There's more to this, but I can't get into it in this video. I explained it in the Jeopardy prophecy video, actually, titled Jeopardy prophecy video, which is one of the amazing videos explaining the death of Alex Trebek in Jeopardy. And anyway, this cow here led to the quarterback, who was number 7 for Pittsburgh, visiting it because he thought it was an omen from God that the Pittsburgh Steelers were going to win the Super Bowl, which is typical of non-belief in God and materialism, etc. But anyway, that's why this guy, Big Ben, the quarterback's name was number 7. But anyway, I'm just telling you that story to explain that this was a big news story, and this was a famous cow. Okay, this cow right here. And it was born on this date, September 20th, 2014. Now this cow, Christians know about it. It wasn't reported in the wider news like this cow was, because it's not necessary. This was enough. God used this cow, though, that many Christians are aware of, because it was born at the same time as this cow. And this was born on the prophetic calendar date in the Hebrew calendar, on the feast date. And this is the cow. So the 2 sets of 7 cows in Joseph's dream represent the 7 cows of famine and prosperity. This cow represents the cows of famine. It's the paintbrush type cow, and this is the perfect typeset cow 7, okay? And so this is the cows of prosperity, followed by the cows of famine, 7 cows of prosperity, followed by 7 cows of famine, and in the king's dream that Joseph interpreted. Okay, but the thing is what I'm getting at here is Barack Obama delivered his speech at the extremely prophetic 69th UN General Assembly. It's 69 years. It points to the prophecy that I'm about to explain. He spoke on September 24th. And so he spoke in between these 2 7 cows for a good reason, which I will now explain. Now, many Christians have been wondering over the years, what is the prophetic significance of these 2 cows? What is the meaning of it? What I am explaining here is the meaning of these cows. This is the meaning of the cows. And you'll see it's very straightforward and it's amazing. God was identifying the Antichrist. But that's the problem, actually. The vast majority of Christians have a poor understanding of this prophecy as well. And they think, partly related to their false soteriology and what I was mentioning earlier about dispensationalism and things like of this nature, they have a false understanding of 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, and they falsely believe that it is impossible to know the identity of the Antichrist before some supposed event, like him stepping on foot of the Temple Mount or what. I don't, it's actually silly. It's very silly. But they think that the he and the what that Paul was referring to the Holy Spirit that's being removed. But Paul wasn't referring to the Holy Spirit. He was also, furthermore, speaking to the Thessalonians as if they knew what he was talking about, but he was speaking cryptically. And why did he speak cryptically? He spoke cryptically and not openly because whoever would have been in possession of his letters would have been in danger. Because the he and the what, why did he refer to the Holy Spirit as a he and a what? He was referring to Caesar and Rome. The he and the what. And Caesar's move of the capital of the empire to Constantinople. Constantine. He was speaking of Constantine in Rome. And Constantine's move of the capital of Rome to Constantinople, which allowed the bishops of Rome to rise in power, which ultimately became popes. And that is because all along, Paul was telling the Thessalonians that the bishop of Rome is the Antichrist. Because all along, popes have been antichrists. The office of pope is blasphemy. Any Catholic that doesn't know that doesn't understand the Bible or Christianity or the gospel, or I should say has a very poor understanding of these things. But the reason why the Antichrist is the Pope is because it's designed to be a test for these Catholics and other Christians that don't know this and believe that the Pope is somehow a holy figure, even though they're not Catholic. So anyway, so that's another subject, how popes have always been antichrists, but it leads to the Antichrist at the end. And those conservative Catholics are also deceived who think that it's only this particular pope that is bad and the rotten one. No, popes have always been antichrists. And anyway, it's all leading to the Antichrist, which is the Pope. And the second, because there's 2 Antichrists. The second one is Barack Obama, who speaks like a dragon, as it says of the second Antichrist, who gets his power from the first Antichrist. Okay. Let's see. And furthermore, regarding 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, the Antichrist is first apostate and then a political figure, which is the Pope. The Pope, the papacy, is apostate, and then he's a political figure. So the Antichrist cannot be a political figure and not a religious figure. He's first apostate. That's what it says in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. He's the deceiver. And that is Catholicism. It's the wolf in sheep's clothing. It's deception from Satan. That is Catholicism. It is designed by Satan, Catholicism. And sorry to Catholics here, I'm sorry, but the purpose of this prediction is to prove this. It's time to wake up and discontinue this paganism that is wrapped in the appearance of Christianity, but is really pagan religion, ancient pagan religion repackaged to make it seem like the Bible for the very naive and those that don't understand the Bible. Okay? But that's not to say that, God hates Catholics. I'm not saying that. I'm trying to help Catholics here. And furthermore, in the book of Revelation, the church to Thyatira, the letter that Jesus wrote to Thyatira is speaking to Catholics. And he says that there are some Catholics that, are doing good works. Okay? It's not to condemn Catholics, but Catholicism. Catholicism is the wolf in sheep's clothing. Okay. So what I was saying, though, is that this is the amazing purpose of the two cows. And it communicated that Barack Obama is the Antichrist in the 70th set of 7 years in Bible prophecy. Because Barack Obama spoke at the beginning of the 69th, and in the prophecy, the 69th, the prophecy is broken into a period of 69 weeks, which isn't weeks. It's symbolic of 7 years. Anyway, a period of 69 followed by a period of the 70th period, which is a period of 7 years. And that's parallel with the dream of the 7 years of cows of famine, because in the dream, the 7 cows of famine represented 7 years of famine, which is symbolic of the end times period, which is a parallel with Daniel chapter 9 and the 70th period of 7 years, which follows the 69 period of years, which is why Barack Obama spoke at the 69th, in other words, hinting at the following 7 years of the Antichrist, which is why he was born in between these two cows with the 7 on their foreheads. Okay? Barack Obama is the 44th president who was born in Kenya. 44 equals 11 times 4. In the Bible, the number 11 is symbolic of the execution of God's judgment. This symbolism involving the number 11 includes the story of the Tower of Babel in Genesis chapter 11. This is why on 9/11, the first tower was struck by Flight 11, with a crew of 11 people that crashed into the twin towers that looked like a giant 11 in the 11th state to join the Union, in the city with a name made up of 11 letters, New York City. This is because Jesus coined the phrase the 11th hour, which referred to the last hour of daylight before darkness in ancient Israel, and in English is an idiom that means last chance, as in last chance for the nation to repent and turn back to God before judgment destruction. But again, the number 11 symbolizes the execution of God's judgment. Additionally, the number 11 in the Bible is symbolic of God's promises to the Hebrews of blessings and curses for obedience and disobedience that were given to them before they entered the promised land after escaping the king of Egypt. In the Bible, the king of Egypt is a type for the Antichrist who will rule during the end times, a period of time that is foreshadowed in the king's dream about 14 cows. The events on 9/11 were a warning of God's promises of judgment and destruction on the nation of America. This judgment will include the rule of the American Pharaoh Antichrist over America, and is the Antichrist who was born in Kenya. This is why the Antichrist is the 44th president. The number 44 hints at 11 times 4. As explained, the number 11 hints at 9/11 and God's promises regarding the execution of his judgment. 11 times 4 hints at the number 14, and this is the hidden symbolism in the number 44, which is equal to 11 times 4. This is why after 9/11, 14 cows were famously donated to America by a Maasai tribe in Kenya. It is because it hinted at the 44th president and Antichrist who was born in Kenya. A primary reason for the rise in status of Donald Trump during the presidency of the 44th president was for calling him out, Barack Obama, the 44th president. He rose in status for calling the 44th president out on his birth certificate and for not having been born in the U.S., thereby making him constitutionally ineligible to be the president. This crane fell in Manhattan from 45 stories high near 41st Street. This number 41 is the 13th prime number, and in the Bible, the number 13 is symbolic of the Antichrist. Nimrod, a type for the Antichrist in the Tower of Babel story, was the 13th generation from Ham. Haman, another type for the Antichrist, persecuted the Jews on the 13th days of the month. And the two Antichrists are described in the book of Revelation in chapter 13. 41st Street hints at the number 14. And this is why the 45th president, who is from Manhattan, will fall 104 days after the crane fell from 5 stories high near 41st Street, which was 141 weeks and 1 day after 9/11. The 104 days connection, 41st Street, and 141 weeks and 1 day connection between 9/11 and the death of President Trump will communicate God's primary purpose for Trump, which was to trumpet the arrival of the Antichrist, the 44th president, who was born in Kenya, from where 14 cows were donated after 9/11. And this is why Trump rose in status and popularity and ultimately became the president, for initially calling out the 44th president for not having been born in Kenya. It began it all, in other words. It was a symbolic beginning of Trump, his calling out the Antichrist for not having been born in the U.S., up until that time, the biggest lie in history. Since that time, there are two other big lies that began in November and December of 2020. The crane smashed into the tower next to it, also reminiscent of the planes that smashed into the towers. Another reason why the connection between the 14 cows and the Antichrist 44th president is so important are the cows of famine. The king of Egypt put Joseph in charge of the food supply during the famine. Augustus Caesar came to power after the assassination of his uncle Julius in 44 BC, and later took control of the food supply in 22 BC. The number 22 is symbolic of the mark of the Antichrist, because again, the inverse of the mark of the Antichrist is described in Ezekiel chapter 9, which would have been the Tav mark, and the Tav letter is the last letter in the Hebrew alphabet, which is the 22nd letter. The mark of the Antichrist is described in the last book of the Bible, which is the 22nd book out of 22 books in the Bible that have a total of 22 chapters. The Antichrist 44th president, who was born in August, which is why Augustus Caesar took control of the food supply in 22 BC, and came to power after Julius Caesar died in 44 BC, the 44th president, who was born in August, will seize control of the food supply and will use this to enforce the mark of the Antichrist. The following day, after the S&P closed at 4,567.46, it closed down 0.71 points at 4,566.75 at the New York Stock Exchange on 7/26, the day of the crane accident in New York City. In addition to 71 being a combination of 1 and 7, that hints at 1,170, an emphasis of 390, which is the word which symbolizes return of the Lord, as explained in other videos. It seems that 4,566 0.75 off slightly from 4,567 hints at 675, right? The last three numbers here, 675, which is the word for the name of the town in the Bible near Rome named Market of Appius. The name is Market of Appius, and this seems to hint at the stock market. There may be more to this that is not yet seen. Otherwise, 4,566.75 is down 0.25 points from 4,567, if this means anything. And yes, it does, as I'm about to get to. It occurred to me that the crane accident on 41st Street near Lincoln Tunnel hints at the $13 pay for the 54th Regiment and also Lincoln's 13th Amendment to abolish slavery. 41 is the 13th prime number. I should have recognized earlier that $13 points to the 13th Amendment. I explained this earlier, but this was the point at which I recognized that. This analysis is correct. The crane that was building a 54-story tower dropped 16 tons of concrete and fell from 41st Street near the entrance of the Lincoln Tunnel is pointing to the 16th president, President Lincoln, the 54th Regiment's unequal pay of $13, and the 13th Amendment, because the number 41 is the 13th prime number. On this day that the crane collapsed, the Dow recorded its 13th day in a row of gains. Okay, so this gives us this number 13 on this day, which confirms that 41 hints at the 13th prime number. The Dow had established a 13-day winning streak, which ended on this day. And this winning streak was its longest since 1987. 1987 was the year of the Black Monday stock market crash, when the Dow collapsed 22.6% in one day. H226, the 226th word in Strong's Hebrew Old Testament Concordance, is the word that means prophetic sign. The collapse, in other words, the stock market crash was a prophetic sign. The collapse of this crane in New York City, where the New York Stock Exchange is, points to this. It points to the stock market crash, the crash of the crane. The crash of the crane is a stock market crash sign. Out of the ashes of the collapse of the stock market and financial system will come the digital currency from the Federal Reserve that will be used to oppress a minority that refuse to receive the mark of the Antichrist. This is the reason for tying in Abraham Lincoln and the 54th Massachusetts Regiment. The crash of the crane is also reminiscent of the plane crashes into the towers on 9/11, and the planes were flights from Massachusetts. Okay, the planes were flights from Massachusetts. And it hints at the 54th Massachusetts Regiment. Okay. This is why the S&P closed at 4,566.75 on this day that the Dow gained for the 13th day in a row. G675, Market of Appius, which hints at the stock market. This 4,566.75 number was pointed to through the previous day's close at 4,567.46, as was explained. This is a 0.25 point difference from an even 4,567, okay? This close, again, 4,566.75 is a 0.25 point difference from the prophetic 4,567 level, which is the equivalent of Satan. This is because the day that the S&P closed at 4,567.46 is 25 days before August 19th, 2023, a date God is heavily pointing to with stock market symbolism. For example, it will be exactly 430, which hints at 8430, which is the word for my God, days before, or months, I should say, months after the black market, stock market crash in October of 1987. This is the reason why the Dow's longest winning streak since January 1987 ended on the day that the S&P closed at 0.25 points below 4,567, because 25 days later will be the 430th month anniversary of the stock market crash in 1987. Okay, but there's more. There's much more. August 19th is a Saturday. Therefore, we know that God is not pointing to a similar one-day crash like in 1987 for this date. However, I suppose it is possible that God is pointing to a Black Monday crash on Monday, August 21st, 2023. If so, it would be the case that God needed the connections to line up with the 19th for other reasons and connections, for which there are many. Alternatively, August 19th, 2023 might be a step, and God is pointing to the 36th anniversary of Black Monday on October 19th, 2023, which would be 2 days after Harris's predicted plane crash. But this seems unlikely given that it seems that the signs on July 26th are for indicating that the market has now peaked, and given the coming bombing of Damascus and dirty bomb in New York City in September. Okay. On the day that the Dow, on this same day as James's son and Musk tweet, and the day that the S&P closed at 4,567.46, there was a funnel cloud over the Capitol building, which communicated the Antichrist's power in Washington. Okay, that's a stunning confirmation of all of this. Okay, and again, this is exactly 86 weeks after the other 4,567 stock market crash when Marcus Lamb died. Okay, this is because the Antichrist will enforce the mark of the Antichrist, and the Antichrist will be the president in Washington, D.C. That's who will be made president through the 25th Amendment in the Capitol building, which, come to think of it, is why the next day the Dow closed down 0.25 points, is because it hints at the 25th Amendment, which will be used in the Capitol building to make the Antichrist the president again. Wow. Okay, so I didn't know that until I just read this. Okay, someone sent me this video, ! In the King James Version Bible, the first and last verses of the Bible have 44 letters. I'm getting tired here. I apologize. The flood began on the 17th and ended on the 27th of the month. 17 plus 27 equals 44. The verse prior to Revelation 22:21, the last verse of the Bible that has 44 letters, is Hebrews 10:17. Okay, and that's because this hints at the 44th president's return to the White House as a result of the plane crash on the date 10/17 in 2023, October 17th. Jesus said in the Bible that he is the Alpha and the Omega, the first and last letter. Okay, because those are letters. Those are Greek letters. The first letter in the Greek alphabet is the Alpha, and the last letter in the Greek alphabet is Omega. And Jesus said he is the Alpha and the Omega. And the last and first verse in the Bible is 44 letters. And the first day of the flood and last day of the flood is 17 and 27, which equals 44, which hints at the Alpha and the Omega again. And the verse prior to Revelation 22:21, which is the last verse in the Bible that has 44 letters, the other verse, the one prior to it that has 44 letters, the preceding one is way back in Hebrews 10:17, which means or hints at the 44th president who will come to power through the plane crash on the date 10/17. Okay, that's amazing. Okay, now we come to the climax here, the end here. There was this prophetic sign on July 26th, the day of these signs I'm describing, the crane sign and the stock market sign, when the S&P closed 25 points underneath the previous close and ended its 13 weeks, or the Dow ended its 13 days winning streak and all that. Okay, there was a fox at the wall of the Temple Mount. As I wrote, I had a feeling that there was something to the 0.25 points loss on 7/26. Again, on 7/25, the S&P 500, 500 equals Antichrist, closed at 4,567.46, 4,546 equals Satan, 46 chromosomes, mark of the Antichrist that changes the 46 chromosomes. The following day, it closed at 4,566.75, which was 0.25 points below 4,566, which equals Satan. I figured this meant something. Sure enough, this fox at the Temple Mount wall on July 26, 2023, the 9th of Av in Israel, is the answer. So this 9th of Av date is the big prophetic date in Israel that regards the temple and the Temple Mount, okay? So that's why the rabbis in Israel are talking about this fox sign on this day, because it hints at, the fox hints at the wall, the fox on the wall, the Temple Mount at the wall, the fox at the Temple Mount wall hints at Lamentations chapter 5, verse 18 in the Bible, quote, because of the mountain of Zion, which is where the Temple Mount is, which is desolate, the foxes walk upon it, unquote. After Jesus' crucifixion, the temple was destroyed by the Romans, and then Jerusalem was made desolate for 19 centuries. Okay, so this 9th of Av date is very, very important in God's prophetic signs regarding Israel. I would love to tell you all about it, but it would take an hour, and I truly mean that. So we'll just leave it at that. And so anyway, this is why it is amazing that this fox sign, and why the rabbis think it's amazing, is because the fox came to the Temple Mount wall on this 9th of Av date. In other words, it's a prophetic sign from God. The fox on the wall hints at Lamentations chapter 5, verse 18, which is, as I said, because of the mountain of Zion, which is desolate, the foxes walk upon it. And as I was saying, I'm just remembering all of it. I said I had an interruption there. You might have heard of it. So as I was saying, Jesus, after he was crucified, the Lord departed Israel. He left the Jews, and he walked out on them and went to the Gentiles. And long story short. But anyway, now God is in the process of restoring his nation, Israel. And so the number 25 is symbolic of the Temple Mount in Ezekiel. The number 25,000 is mentioned 14 times in the book of Ezekiel regarding the future Messianic age temple and Temple Mount. It's the main dimensional number for a future temple and Temple Mount. Okay, so this number, again, like I'm saying, is associated with the temple, the number 25. And it occurs 14 times. So, and that's why I have in brackets here. This date, July 26th, was 141 weeks and 1 day after 9/11 and 104 days before Trumpet's fall, which is just hinted at with this 14 times of the number 25 being mentioned regarding the Temple Mount. But regardless, that aside, 25 is 5 times 5. Okay, the 25 points close under 4,567 on July 26th is 5 weeks and 5 days before it is predicted that Israel will nuke Damascus and completely destroy Damascus on September 4th, 2023. Israel will drop a nuclear bomb on Damascus, Syria on September 4th, 2023, and it will be 5 weeks and 5 days after the prophetic 0.25 point loss. And again, the 0.25 point loss is confirmed to be prophetic because it occurred on the date 7/26th. On this 9th of Av date, which is about the temple, and 25 is symbolic of the temple and the Temple Mount, and on this same day, we had the FOXX at the Temple Mount. And the FOXX is Antichrist symbolism because, again, the letters in FOXX is 666, and Herod was a fox in the Bible. And also, this ties into the Jamie Foxx sign, right? That I explained at the beginning of this video. And Musk's tweet on the 25th, the day before the 26th, which is when the FOXX was. But the two dates are tied together because the S&P closed at 4,567 on the 26th and then 20.25 points lower the next day. So that's how they tie together. And so in other words, the Jamie Foxx ties into this Fox sign. It's amazing. So where was I here? So 5 weeks and 5 days hints at 5 times 5 equals 25. That's why it's 5 weeks and 5 days, because when they nuke Damascus, that will lead to the Jews resuming their worship on the Temple Mount. And this period of 5 weeks and 5 days is also 40 days, which is prophetic in the Bible. The flood waters increased for 40 days, for example. The Jews were in the wilderness before crossing into the Promised Land for 40 years. But anyway, it is the Antichrist who will be on the Temple Mount. And this is why on July 26, 2023, the S&P 500, as in G500 equals Antichrist, closed 0.25 points below 4,567, which is the word meaning Satan. Because the Antichrist will be on the Temple Mount, and 25 hints at the Temple Mount. This is the big Antichrist date. I've already explained it all, right? The 86 weeks connection and all of that. Okay, so on 7/26, the crane fell in New York City, which is home to 1.6 million Jews and is the largest Jewish community in the world. 1.6 hints at 4 times 0.4 and hints at the 44th president Antichrist, who will be on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, persecuting Jews in Judea. And this Antichrist was born in Kenya, from which 14 cows were donated after 9/11, and 7/26 was 141 weeks and 1 day after 9/11, as I already explained. The nuking of Damascus will lead to Jews worshiping on the Temple Mount. So that's why this connection, once again, this is the climax to all of this, if you will, if there could be such a thing, because there's, like I said at the beginning, this information in this video targets so many different things, including 3 different predictions, like I said. But anyway, that's why it's 5 weeks and 5 days from the 0.25 point sign on the day of the FOXX at the Temple Mount, is because 5 weeks and 5 days later, the Jews will nuke Damascus, which will lead to them worshiping on the Temple Mount again. And for that matter, be the big kickoff event, if you will, to the rise of the Antichrists. In fact, because we talked about the connection from this to the beginning of the alien deception at the beginning of this video, it is believed that the aliens will, or rather, the Pope will announce that aliens have made him the ambassador to the world. And this will be the deception that's described in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, the wicked deception that brings about the Antichrist. he will claim that aliens have arrived and they've made him the ambassador, the leader of the world. And the aliens will be claiming to be here to help us with our nuclear weapons. And that's why it is no coincidence, for example, that the Pope, one of his big things is the nuclear weapons issue, and why he visited the Hidden Christians monument in Nagasaki, where he delivered this speech that he had been wanting to deliver for a long time about nuclear weapons. Anyway, there is this, Nagasaki is the location of where the Portuguese converted many Christians, Japanese, to Catholicism. And there is these Christian, and they're hidden Christians because they were persecuted by the other Japanese over the centuries. So they're called the hidden Christians, and they have these sites such as temples and things. But there's also the monument in Nagasaki that the Pope visited. And this was exactly 666 days, which is, of course, the number of the Antichrist, after UNESCO, which is Antichrist, the one world religion, UNESCO, the United Nations, is essentially a front for communism. It is what it is. It's a front for socialism. That's another subject. If you don't know that, you don't know much. If you don't know that, you need to learn some things about the United Nations, is what I mean to say. And anyway, so the UNESCO is Antichrist. And anyway, on January 30th, the night of the prophetic super blue blood moon, by the way, the UNESCO officially made these sites in Nagasaki World Heritage Sites, okay? And then 666 days later, the Pope visits the Hidden Christians monument in Nagasaki, which is clear evidence that the Pope is the Antichrist, from whom people will be hiding, from whom Christians will be hiding, hence the Hidden Christians monument. Anyway, the Pope, the aliens will claim to be here to help us with our nuclear weapons after they're used again, when they are used by Israel on Damascus. And that will fulfill Isaiah chapter 17. And out of the chaos, the Jews will resume worship on the Temple Mount, but also out of the chaos, the aliens will arrive claiming to be here to help us with our nuclear weapons, and make the Pope the Antichrist, who will make Barack Obama his second in command, his voice, because the Pope is old. He's 86 years old. Speaking of the 86 weeks connection in this video, by the way, that's very important. I should have picked that up. That's another thing I didn't realize just till now. So again, from the death of Marcus Lamb, when the Dow closed, the S&P closed at exactly 4,567.00, Mark Islam, it is exactly 86 weeks, and the 86th word in Greek is Hades, hell, and in Hebrew is to kneel, bow the knee, as in kneel to Satan. It's 86 weeks to the other close of the S&P at 4,567, and all the signs that I've been talking about here, and the 0.46, which is 46 chromosomes, and the mark of the Antichrist, right? Well, so the 86 weeks also reveals the identity of the Antichrist, the first one, which is Pope Francis, who is currently 86 years old, and will be 86 years old when the first nuke goes off, and when the aliens arrive. And the end times really get going, which is what will happen after Israel nukes Damascus. The 16 tons of concrete that dropped from up high and smashed to the ground is symbolic of the nuke that will be dropped by Israel on Damascus 5 weeks and 5 days after the 0.25 sign in the S&P on this day. The 1.6 million Jews in New York City confirms this 16 tons of concrete and this connection. In the Bible, this passage, Judges 15:4, quote, "And Samson went and caught 300 foxes and took firebrands and turned tail to tail and put a firebrand in the midst between the two tails." Okay, so this is the Samson option. If I didn't explain it in this video, I probably didn't. So the Samson option is an unsaid policy, an unofficial policy, a clandestine policy, if you will, of Israel's regarding its response to a threat to its survival from its neighbors, from its enemies. And in that scenario, they will resort to using nuclear weapons and destroying their enemies if they are threatened, if their survival is threatened. That's the Samson option. And this comes from the Bible in the story about Samson. And this passage here is a quote from that story that involves foxes. And that's why it's relevant to this email thread and these particular prophetic signs that are revealing the date that Israel will nuke Damascus, because in the moment in which it will use the Samson option. That is the point here. The reason why Israel will nuke Damascus is that it will resort to this in a moment of their survival being threatened. I assume with the thousands of rockets that have been amassed through the aid of Persia, through the aid of Iran, in Syria and in Lebanon and in the West Bank, or rather in Gaza. So in that moment of crisis, when Israel will be threatened, it will use nukes to defend itself, and this will be why Israel will nuke Damascus. And as I am saying, as a result, and God's purpose for this is to further the restoration of Israel, and in particular, the restoration of the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. And Jews will then begin worshiping on the Temple Mount again after this event, when Israel will nuke Damascus through having to use the Samson option. And so God has, in his genius way, tied in this FOXX to this prophetic sign that occurred on July 26th to tie it into and hint at the Samson option. Okay? And so, and again, the reason that's why the FOXX was at the Temple Mount wall. It's hinting at what I just described, the Samson option being used, which will lead to the restoration of the Temple Mount. The FOXX at the Temple Mount is symbolic of desolation and Jews not controlling the Temple Mount. That comes from other Old Testament prophecies regarding the exilation of the Jews to Babylon, for example. And so that's what God is hinting at through this FOXX, and why it is occurring with a connection to the date that Israel will nuke Damascus. And as a result, further the restoration of Israel and the Temple Mount out of the chaos that will ensue after nuking Damascus. So there's this passage involving Samson and foxes. And as I wrote here in the email, Samson ruled for 20 years. Israel will use the Samson option and nuke Damascus exactly 20 years after Israeli fighter jets flew over Auschwitz. This is how this date was originally first discovered, this September 4th date in 2023, is because I had learned, well, I should say, first of all, it was prior to this discovered that Israel would bomb Iran on August 26th. And then because of my logical speculation that Israel, as a result of that, would soon after bomb or nuke Damascus and fulfill Isaiah chapter 17, I had assumed, or rather speculated, that it would be not so long afterwards. And then I read again the story of Samson in the Bible in order to find possibly a clue. And in the story, it says that Samson ruled for 20 years. And that is a major clue because 20 years is very symbolic in the Bible. It symbolizes a complete period and a period of waiting. And so that's why I thought to look 20 years back from approximately around August 26th, 2023, a few days after that date. In other words, August 26, 2003, I thought to look a few days after that to see what had happened in history and if there was anything interesting, especially regarding Israel. And then there was. In fact, there's a lot of things, but this is the highlight. And so I think the fact that there are a lot of things in between August 26th and September 4th, 2023, there are a number of profound or interesting related things to Israel that are relevant to this connection and prophecy regarding Israel and Iran and Damascus and the restoration of Israel. So, but this particular event on September 4th, that's how it was discovered, which was the fighter jets, Israeli fighter jets flying over Auschwitz, the death camps, in a symbolic formation, in a ceremonial formation. This jumps out to me as being a prophetic sign, the symbolism in it. This is because if you know the history of the Jews and Bible prophecy, God told the Jews before they entered the promised land that what would happen to them is exactly what happened to them over the last 2,000 years after they rejected Jesus. In the prophecy, God says that in the future they will reject him, and then he will chase them around the world from nation to nation by the sword, for example. And that's literally what happened, and that's why the Jews were everywhere. And when they came back to Israel, which was from almost 100 countries, from every corner of the earth, because they were chased around the world like God said they would be after they would reject him. And the climax of that, which also leads to them returning to Israel, is the Holocaust, which is symbolized by Auschwitz. And so we have the Israeli fighter jets in this symbolic formation over the death camps at Auschwitz being symbolism for the restoration of Israel, which is 20 years later exactly, because that was September 4th, 2003. And the Samson option, which is hinted at with the 20 years in the story of Samson, 20 years exactly after that is September 4th, and that just happens to be a few days after August 26th, which is what was originally discovered. Okay, and so Samson ruled for 20 years. Israel will use the Samson option and nuke Damascus exactly 20 years after Israeli fighter jets flew over Auschwitz. Samson used FOXXs and set them on fire. On July 26, 2023, the crane in New York City caught on fire, and a FOXX was at the wall of the Temple Mount on the 9th of Av, furthermore, which is the date regarding the temple on fire and collapsing. Because all of the symbolic dates, the major dates in this history of the Jews being chased around the world, they all occurred on the 9th of Av date. Let me see if I could just go through some quickly from memory. The day that the Jews were the day that the Grass Action Warsaw policy began. Sorry. The day that the Jews were officially began being put onto the death trains to the death camps was the 9th of Av in the Hebrew calendar. There was also the year before that was the Grass Action Warsaw policy, the German name Grass Action Warsaw policy, which was when the German commandant officially began this policy of rounding up Jews and putting them into the ghettos with a memo that he wrote that was dated the 9th of Av. Okay, and so also World War I, which was also really bad for Jews and displaced Jews all across Europe and led to pogroms in Russia and led to World War II, which was really bad for Jews. World War I officially began when Germany entered the war, and that was on the 9th of Av. That was the beginning of World War I. And then before that, that was the decree by the Alhambra decree. It's been a while. I used to know all of this. I could just, go through it really quickly with people that I was explaining, evangelizing to, explaining proof from the Bible. And so anyway, it's been a while. So that was the Alhambra decree, and that was written in 1492, and that was it had an official date for the Jews to leave Spain, and that date in the Hebrew calendar was the 9th of Av. They had a deadline, the Jews, to either leave by that date or be killed or convert to Catholicism. And so that deadline was the 9th of Av. And then in 1296, there was the decree in the French decree. It was the King of France, King Philip the Fair. He was broke and he wanted to raise money and did so through kicking the Jews out and stealing their property and possessions. And that was Okay, so anyway, I forget the name of it, but that was I think it was 1306, and then in 1296 the same thing happened in England. It was the same thing. It was the Edict of Expulsion. That was the name of it. I forget the French one. The Edict of Expulsion was in 1296, and I could be getting the years wrong now. But anyway, same thing. The king wanted to kick the Jews out, and the decree had an official deadline. And again, it was the 9th of Av date in the Hebrew calendar. And then the time before that was the First Crusade. And the First Crusade, that began in 1096 with the decree from the Pope. And the Pope had an official document to begin this official the crusade. And that official start date was the 9th of Av in the Hebrew calendar. And in the first month, 10,000 Jews were killed as the Crusaders marched across Europe. They decided to kill Jews on the way to the Holy Land. And then once they got to Jerusalem, they also killed many Jews there too. And so that was very bad for Jews. And especially in that time, 10,000 people is a lot of people, especially in that time. And that first crusade led to other crusades, which were also bad for Jews. And then in the second century, the Jews were following this guy named Bar Kokhba. They thought he was the Messiah, and so they were rebelling against the Roman occupation. And the Romans finally put down this revolt in 135 AD, and as recorded in history, in one day, they killed an estimated 100 to 500,000 Jews in one day. And that date in the Hebrew calendar happens to be the 9th of Av. And then in the first century, in 70 AD, the Romans finally broke through the walls of Jerusalem and burned down the temple and destroyed the temple on the 9th of Av. And it goes back to the 6th century BC, when the Babylonians came to Jerusalem and destroyed the first temple, and that was also on the 9th of Av. And so this 9th of Av date goes all the way back to then, and the destruction of the first temple. And both temples were destroyed on the 9th of Av. And the reason is because of this prophecy I was saying regarding how when the Jews would reject him, God, after they entered the promised land, then God would chase them around the world from nation to nation. And so the question is, how did the Jews reject God? In the second century, in the first century, around after the Second Temple destruction, what happened in that time before the temple was destroyed? Because after the temple was destroyed, the Jews were after the rebellion of Bar Kokhba, the remaining Jews were taken as slaves into the Roman Empire, and that's how they ended up being dispersed around around Europe and the world. So the question is then, how is it that the Jews rejected God? And I just slipped there. That the answer, of course, is through rejecting Jesus, God. And that's the only explanation that makes any sense. And so, anyway, it's as if as the God is chasing them around the world as he said he would in this prophecy, he's pointing to the destruction of the first and second temples in order to demonstrate how it is that and why they've been chased around the world, which is for rejecting him and for rejecting Jesus, God. Okay, so anyway, that's probably a good thing that I told you a little bit of this story regarding the significance of 9th of Av before finishing this video. And this is why this FOXX, this prophetic sign at the Temple Mount on the 9th of Av, is so very important, because this is the date that the first and second temples were destroyed. And furthermore, this is the date on which the Jews were chased around the world, fulfilling that prophecy. But again, this date is about the temple on the Temple Mount and collapsing and fire. And that was the day of the fire on the crane, and then the fox, which is hinting at Samson and how he lit foxes on fire. Samson used his might to collapse the pillars and the crane that collapsed and fell. Okay, Samson used his might to collapse the pillars in the story. And the crane that collapsed and fell is symbolic of the pillar Samson caused to buckle and fall, because the crane fell and it was on fire. Okay, the pillar Samson buckled caused the house to fall on the people underneath. The crane fell and injured people on the ground underneath the crane. This is the reason for the 0.25 points in the New York Stock Exchange, because the crane is in New York, 5 weeks and 5 days, which hints at 5 times 5 equals 25. And this is the number, as I mentioned earlier in the video, that symbolizes the Temple Mount and the temple. This is why this happened 5 weeks and 5 days before the Samson option and the Jews taking the Temple Mount. Aliens and UFOs are demons masquerading as aliens and UFOs. Most people's spiritual experiences are demonic deception, especially if they are not a true follower of Christ. Jesus died for you. It is time to repent, which means to change one's ways and turn to God and become a disciple of Jesus. Please leave a like and upvote the video. And once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more. Don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. It is essential that everyone immediately read the homepage of my website, TrumpPrediction.com.